I want to talk now about sensory impairments, visual and auditory impairments. These are the reason I put these into one um, talk is because they deal with our how we access information. There are two different impairments, specifically visual impairments and auditory impairments, under this umbrella of sensory impairments. So let's look at IDEA's definition of visual impairments. It includes blindness, means an impairment in vision that, even with correction, adversely affects a child's educational performance. This term includes partial sight and blindness. Rarely will you get somebody that is completely blind and not able to see anything. There is some residual vision, and so we want to use as much residual vision as possible. With the individuals with visual impairments, you have to have in the FIE members of the assessment team that are a licensed ophthalmologist or optometrist report. That has to be there. Somebody that has the ability to evaluate low vision, so low vision evaluation needs to be there. And then you need to have a teacher that is especially trained to work with students with visual impairments. There's a lot of assistive technology, a lot of different things that go along with this assessment. And so these are the members of the assessment team. So you'll need to have your AT assessment team members as part of this process also. And there needs to be a learning media assessment by a teacher for the visually impaired. So that's where you get a lot of the AT materials for this particular disability category. Now, functionally blind means a student that had with the best vision, best correction that they have, they still are at 2200. So what most people can see at 20 feet, they are 200 feet, they can see only at 20 feet. And so that's called legal blindness. And so we need to include those folks. And again, you will be using additional people in your FIE for this particular disability category. So now we're going to meet someone with a visual impairment, and while you're watching this video, I want you to pay close attention to the video and think about all the special services, the related services, the instructional services, and the assistive technology equipment that is necessary for this student, Anna, to be successful in the classroom. So we're going to watch a video about Anna.
Dealing with the daily ups and downs, thumps and bumps of school life is something most children take for granted. But imagine coping with classes, corridors and playtime if your world is just a hazy blur. In this programme, we spend a day with Anna, a visually impaired pupil at Wadhurst Primary School in East Sussex.
Your ideas?
Through trial and error, the staff has worked towards integrating her into the school.
I'll put a snack there like that to remind us. Okay, let's have one more.
I think the lessons from Wadhurst is that they're currently displaying good practice in inclusion, but we'd like that to become standard practice, essentially. And the fact that they're not setting themselves up as experts, they've experienced problems, but they keep at it.
So what problems have they had to overcome? How hard has it been for the school to ensure she can access the curriculum? And how difficult has it been for her to make friends? Is Anna's world a happy one?
I like lessons. I like lunchtime.
Is there anything you don't like?
Well, I don't like sometimes at playtime I don't like people saying, well, they won't let me do a show series or they won't let me play.
That's not very often though, is it?
Well, no.
Anna does like to be the boss. She does like to dictate to everybody else what they must do and what they can do. So sometimes when they say no, which is quite good for her really.
No, it's bad for my feelings.
Bad for your feelings, but good for you. Otherwise you'd be spoilt.
Okay. Anna's day starts the same as her classmates. First lesson is maths. She does exactly the same work as the rest of the class, but has to work closely with her specially trained teaching assistant.
Please again, see if there's one here. Okay, you ready? Sit down then. Ready? Right. We're in room number 5.
Tell me what you like about maths.
I like easy sums like 2 add 1 equals 3. I like my times tables. I learn them, but I don't learn most of the things in maths.
Can you fill up the side for me?
Anna has 2 braille reading teaching assistants, one of whom is with her all the time.
We try to include her as much as possible in the classroom. Basically, what our aim is to make sure that she's not excluded in any way. It's to support her in her learning generally in every aspect of learning. Playtimes, everything.
Right, good girl. So we've got room number... Well, sometimes it's a case of wandering off and leaving her. Because otherwise she'd be quite happy just to stand and let you do it all for her. Because it's easier.
Right to 10.
I've had to stop and think about stuff that you just do every day without giving it a second glance, giving her things and expecting her to take them without actually touching her finger or something with the pen. And that's the hardest thing, pointing and just assuming.
Also, I think it's to do with giving her independence and allowing her the space to develop the way that she can do things. With me, I found that I was trying at first to do it for her, whereas you have to actually sit back and allow the child to try and then to guide them.
We did have a chat about that, didn't we, with when she comes off the carpet when Kate set a task. And Anna would just come over and then just stand, and you'd have to say, right, get your brailler, get your jelly mat, get your paper, right, we're doing science, we need blue paper for science, get your science, have you put your paper, and it was just one list of instructions. So Maggie and I had a chat and we said, no, what we do is we turn them all into questions. And what do we need now? Right, if we're going to do writing, what do we need now? Making her think for herself.
How much harder do you think it is for her possibly to make friends sometimes, or new friends, because she's got you guys around as her support?
Oh, well, that's part of the stepping back. I mean, when Louise and Catherine, who are Anna's main support, aren't they? They're her best friend. Catherine's her best friend. And Catherine's really cool because she makes it look like that's what everybody does when you're best friends.
Well, I like Louise and Catherine and also Annabelle. I get Catherine to help me make sure I don't bump into things. So Catherine is my helper.
The other children in the class benefit from her presence and she benefits from them. And I'm always amazed at how she gets around places. The other children in the class know her well. They know better than I do how to support her, for example, walking around the school. And it's almost like she bounces off them as she walks down the corridor.
They help me, but They mustn't treat me like a baby. Because I'm not a baby now. I'm an 8-year-old.
She's a very direct child. She will tell them if it's too much help.
I say, please don't fuss over me. You're giving me an earache or a headache.
It might seem like, you want to wrap them up in cotton wool and put them in a small school where nobody's going to, bump into them or her in particular, but it isn't the best. Life is quite difficult, and there are a lot of people out there who are not going to treat her with kid gloves, and you can't wrap her up in cotton wool all the time.
Nice straight line. Good girl, that was fantastic. A bit of a bowl rather than a croak. Oh, yeah.
Sometimes there are issues for visually impaired children in terms of empathy and understanding other children.
Good girl.
And sometimes things need to be talked through with Anna. She might not understand why a child's gone off or something. That all the nuances of visual expression and that kind of thing, she won't be able to key into like other children do. And so she does need support in understanding other people, in understanding her impact on other people, but also why they're reacting in certain ways as well.
It's important for other children within the class to recognise the situations and to get them on your side and on Anna's side, and for them to become friendly, for them to understand the relationship that should be developing between them. Sometimes at an early stage, staff can go into the playground, for instance, and try and help to initiate games, and then withdraw. It's very important to try and withdraw as soon as possible so that the child can actually be interacting properly with the other children.
Well, my class friends sometimes get sad when I cry, and sometimes they get angry when I do naughty things.
One of her targets, the last term was it?
Yes,
was to look like she's listening. Because otherwise you get all this.
To attend to the teacher, to actually make sure that she's facing towards the
person
teacher,
who's
so
talking,
and the person who's talking knows that she is listening.
Who do we know that works with the government? Who might we pretend to write to? Can you sit down?
Jean took ages to explain that people can't tell if you're listening to them if you're not looking, and if you're not looking then people won't talk to you. And part of it is it's a lot of socialisation we're working on majorly.
She forgets a lot
interacting
about everyday things that we take for granted.
Niceties, isn't it, that you pick up on visual, spatial awareness when she's talking to your belly button.
It's knowing what's going on around her, because she can't actually see what's going on around her. She has no idea what the other children are looking like, for example. She hasn't developed an awareness of appropriate behaviour really like we have.
Where does he live? 10 Downing Street.
Some work which Anna does within the classroom is very much on her own, simply because it's much easier for her to be working with a TA. In other cases, it's very important for her to be working with other children as members of a group, and of course this will help her social interaction with them.
It's very difficult actually, and I've tried to set aside time when I work with Anna and a group, but obviously just being one of me, I have to get around to every child in the class, for literacy and numeracy.
Anna, what about you?
You get loads of energy.
That's a good one. So it helps you to get some energy, does it? Why do we need energy, Anna?
To try and work with a group and Anna is very difficult. So in some cases it works, but for some lessons it's just not practical. But I do, you do make a concerted effort, but it's not at all easy.
Why might you need energy?
Playtime. When you do your work, you have to have energy, but if you don't, you won't do any work and you'll be in trouble.
Excellent, so good girl.
Recently, the most frustrating thing is the noise the brailler makes when she's having to braille, and particularly if Kate has said we've got to work in silence and all you can hear is her, and she's very aware of how loud the brailler is. So that should be sorted with the new piece of kit we've got coming.
Anna has a lot of equipment to help her access the curriculum, all paid for by the LEA.
This is my brailler. You use this carriage return like that. This is a CCTV. It's a new one. You have two buttons to turn it on and off. It makes things bigger when I can't see small things. Let me tell you about my computer. These are the keys, and this is the keyboard. These are the speakers, and there's my new printer.
But there can be a downside to so much extra equipment in the classroom.
To be honest, my classroom isn't that big anyway, and with 29 children and another adult, it's very limited in space. So to use up that whole corner, and I'm always saying to everybody, no more room, you can't have any more room. Can you see Mr. Skeleton over here? Can you see him? Yeah. There's his pelvis. You need to watch carefully because you're going to be doing this in a minute. I have to be a lot more organised and forward think quite a lot, so that Anna's teaching assistants and her visiting teacher are able to get the work and modify all the worksheets and prepare that, which obviously takes quite a long time. Things like maths planning and literacy planning, I have to meet with her visiting teacher once a week, which can take up to an hour, maybe more, on different days.
Now, can you see what this one's called here?
It's got the proper terms as well.
Cranium, well done. So the skirt is the cranium. So we go round the
I think one of the big mistakes I make is I love to think on my feet and change my plans and think, oh, that's going to work better, and it doesn't when you've got a visually impaired child, because there's so much planning that needs to go into what she has to do. Things like using reference books is always really difficult, and you have to plan that for weeks in advance so that we can order them in Braille or get other alternatives in. But in terms of actually having Anna in the class as a pupil, it's been a lot easier than I anticipated.
I'm going to leave you two to it now, okay?
Is it here, miss? All the way down to there?
It certainly is.
Year 4s can come back when they're good and ready. Good afternoon, everyone.
When Anna was born, like any child, you have, without even thinking about it, you have a life mapped out. And when you find out that your child is blind, somehow that life dies. But that life that you thought was taken away isn't taken away. It's just slightly different. So that's what we want for Anna, for her to be who she is, but given every opportunity to be what she wants to be in the future.
So, oops.
Playing games? Let's play some games.
Find out what's going on here.
No, that's a no, isn't it?
Okay, so let's get back to our discussion. So what did you find with Anna that is very important to understand for a student with a visual impairment? So you need to be thinking that through as we continue to walk through our talk. Now then, we're going to look at students with auditory impairments. And this is the IDEA definition of a child with an auditory or hearing impairment. And so as you look through this, you'll see there's always this phrase that a student has this issue that adversely affects their educational performance. Okay? But is not included under the definition of, but it always affects their educational performance. That's the whole thing about educational need. So let's move on. This was the definition. Assessment. Students that are being assessed with an auditory impairment, they must have a official evaluation by an otolaryngologist, ENT, that's a licensed medical doctor in Texas, with for our Texas folk. Also, must have an audiological evaluation by a licensed audiologist, and it must include a description of what the implications of hearing loss are for the student in a variety of circumstances, with or without amplification. So that has to occur. So you have to have your ENT, medical doctor, and an audiologist on the FIE assessment team. Then you also have to have related services with a teacher of the auditorily impaired, and then there's a lot of information and use of finger spelling and braille, etc., that needs to be, not braille. Braille's for the visual impaired. Finger spelling and sign language to be used with that student. So you need to be trained also. So now then, we're going to meet Rosie. I mean, this is Rosie. Same school, different girl. So we're going to meet Rosie and listen to, and what we did with Anna, I want you to do the same thing with Rosie. This is just not being a happy camper today. So let's get there and let's visit about Rosie.
My name is Brody, and I go to Wilton
Rosie,
Primary
not Brody.
Rosie attends Willingdon Primary School in Eastbourne, a mainstream school with a facility supporting hearing impaired children attached to it. Willingdon works hard to include Rosie in every aspect of school life.
I'm Jan Pearman, teacher of the deaf, and I'm head of the hearing support facility. At this hearing support facility, we use total communication, which generally encompasses all forms of communication. So depending on the child and depending on the context, we might use sign supporting English or signed English or BSL or oral communication, or a combination of all of those depending on the child and what's needed at that moment.
Not every school benefits from a team of signing TAs and a teacher for the deaf. But many of the strategies used at Willingdon can be employed at mainstream schools without additional facilities to enable hearing impaired children to access the curriculum fully. This programme focuses on those strategies.
Rosie is severely deaf in the right ear, and she's got a severe to profound loss in the left ear, which means that with a good use of hearing aids and a radio aid in school, she can access speech in good conditions.
Right, you're going to tell me how much you need to put in.
I was a bit nervous when I came to Wilton Primary School because I'd never been in a mainstream school before. But then I thought it was really good fun because I got friends now. And this is my best friend Beck.
I'm not deaf, but I like signing. It's good fun.
Rosie spends about 10% of her time in the facility. For other children, that could be maybe as much as 50, 60, 70%. But Rosie accesses the mainstream curriculum quite well with differentiation, so we just reinforce it.
I think maybe.
Every morning, Rosie and the other hearing impaired children have their hearing aids checked in the facility.
This one sounds just a little bit like underwater.
Dad!
That's Dad, that's right.
Dad.
If they only use their hearing aids, the teacher would have to be very close to Rosie and there'd have to be no background noise, and clearly that's not possible in a primary school. So we use a radio aid. The teacher wears a transmitter and Rosie wears the receiver, which is attached to her hearing aid. That means that the teacher's talking into a microphone positioned about here, and then on a radio wavelength, the sound is transmitted to Rosie's receiver, so she can then be several feet away, and she's hearing the teacher's voice as if she were only a metre away.
I'm Miss Binks.
I'm Mrs. Taylor. I'm Miss Green. We're teaching assistants in a mainstream school.
Okay, if we just have a look at next week.
Every Friday, Jan and her team of TAs look over the teachers' plans for the following week to see what work needs differentiation.
And then it's assembly. Which is, one of the biggest things we do on a Friday is actually making sure that we're consistent with the signs. There's lots of signs in lots of words in the national curriculum which don't have a sign language equivalent, and we would have to decide amongst ourselves what we're going to use for that. I'm going to start off just describing the 4 categories, and he's got 4 labels that he's going to then hold up. So that's carbohydrates, proteins, fats, minerals, and vitamins. So we need to be sure about the signs for that. The carbohydrates, I don't know that there isn't a sign for carbohydrates.
We'll just sign carbohydrates.
Yeah, because you can point to the word.
We won't have to finger spell it. That's a big word to.
And then just after that, just carbohydrates.
My name is Mr. Sykins. Carbohydrates, well done. Well, so look.
Wayne Sykins is Rosie's class teacher. An NQT, Wayne is still learning how to accommodate a deaf child in his classroom.
Fats. Rosie, would you like to come and get one? I've had a lot of support from the school for supporting Rosie here. I was offered the opportunity to go on a deaf awareness course when I started, and it was very good. It really did help me understand how hearing impaired children learn. Do we see that? Chocolates. Yes. Well done, Rosie. Good girl.
For mainstream class teachers, it does involve more work having a hearing impaired child in the class. They do need to be very meticulous in their planning and the timetable. And it's quite hard for them when they want to be flexible if a lesson is going well, when we need actually for them to stick to quite a tight structure.
Used in all type of instructional text. I work very closely with the TAs. We're meeting every morning and we discuss the lessons that are going to come up and the key words that may be used. Well, first thing we're going to talk about time connectives. So I've got all these words made up and they're going to ask for different. I'm going to ask them for different time connectives. If they can remember them and stick them on the board.
We looked at the plans last week and actually talked about the signs because a lot are similar. So we've actually printed out the signs with the words underneath.
Brilliant.
That Rosie and Liam are going to have a set each in front of them on the table.
And when we plan our lessons, it's really important that we think and try and make everything as visual as we can, so that all of the children understand exactly what is happening the whole time. And all the work connectors that I use, I'm going to put in a line on the board. Okay, well today we're doing an instructional text of how to make a healthy snack. But so that Liam and Rosie can visualise what we're doing, I'm going to make it first for them using the apricots, banana chips, etc. in front of them so they can see all the steps.
Brilliant. There isn't actually a sign that we can use apart from peach, small peach. So we've actually printed a picture of an apricot, and we can say it's similar to a peach but small. Yes.
Well, my greatest link for finding out if Rosie's understood me or not is through the TA, like who she works with. And during the lesson, once the lesson has started, I'll always go over to the TA to make sure that I'll give them a couple of minutes to make sure Rosie's got it and the other deaf children understand what is being said.
Problems that Rosie encounters on a daily basis involved in the classroom are the teacher often moves around the classroom, which can make lip reading very difficult for her. It's important for us to try and educate the teachers to try and get them to remain in the same place.
The thing that I need to consider probably the most with Rosie in the class is where she's sitting and where I am in relation to her. She obviously needs to be able to see me and to be able to read my lips, as well as be able to see her signer. Yeah, let's go. Also, I need to think about when I'm right on the board not to speak as well, otherwise she wouldn't know what I'm saying.
Order?
Well, I'm ordering you, aren't I? So it's ordering language, let's say.
I hope Mr. can learn them more sign language. Sometimes Mr. Sykins gets to turn on the transmitter so she can't hear. So she keep on saying, it's not on.
I think the pace of the lessons in Year 6 is very fast, and it takes an enormous amount of concentration for her to follow the teacher. She lip reads very well, and most of the time she's following the teacher, but she will swap over to look at the signer if she's got any doubts at all about what was said.
But can anybody see?
And I think the hardest thing for Rosie is if she wants to ask questions back, there's often not time, because by the time we've processed that information so she can access it, the teacher's often moved on.
All children in class have moments when they are not focusing on what the teacher says, and they might be looking out of the window, but they still might be half paying attention because they're half listening to what the teacher's saying. But for Rosie, when she needs those moments, respite, she's actually completely cut off from what's going on, and that can mean that she misses important parts of the lesson, and so it's up to the TA really, who's supporting her at various points in the lesson, to ensure that she's on task.
Just remember it, you can include it.
The skill we want Rosie to develop is to listen and watch the person talking, so she's using her listening skills and her lip reading skills, but also to use the signer to confirm what she's heard or to reinforce for clarification really. So the skill we want is for her to be able to switch from the person talking to the person signing in order to gain all the information.
Yeah, the other pupils act brilliantly towards Rosie. She's very much part of the class. They help her and support her brilliantly.
Carbohydrates.
I think this is something actually quite likes having the TAs around in the classroom, because he very much wants to take an active part in communicating, obviously, Rosie directly. And many times he's asked us what a specific sign is, so he can have a conversation quite fluidly with Rosie.
My relationship with Rosie is I speak to her on a one-to-one, and I know the signers are there if I can't communicate with them, but I'll always try and speak to her on a one-to-one first of all.
Really important for Rosie to take part in all aspects of school life, not just the mainstream curriculum, but the extracurricular activities. She's just taking part in some football trials, and we would decide whether she needs support for that or not. For something like football, we would support at the beginning, and then she's able to join in with the others without support. Signing is encouraged throughout the school. All assemblies, concerts, Christmas productions are completely signed.
And he shot and scored. Now Willingdon were 2-0 up.
Within mainstream schools, obviously many teachers are not going to sign, and that's really why we're there, to provide that sign support. So it's not essential that they sign. What we would expect from teachers is to learn the basics of good morning and hello and greetings, so they can have simple conversations with the student, because it just makes such a difference to their life.
Where else did he put the snake?
So how does Rosie cope in group discussions?
Rosie?
I don't always lose it.
Class discussions are difficult for Rosie. I try as hard as I can to, when someone else says something, it's important that I repeat the question, repeat the answer that the child is given, so that Rosie understands what other people are saying. And we do use a transmitter, which helps Rosie to hear. And if another child is speaking at length, we come up to the front, and they're used to putting the transmitter on themselves. And everyone's very good at doing that, so that allows her to hear.
I don't flush the unusual loo and open bathroom door.
When the children are working in groups, we do have a conference mic that we can put on in the middle of the table and attach a transmitter to it, so that all the children can be heard equally.
So does sharing a classroom work for Rosie and her hearing peers?
Benefits for other children are often the visual resources that we provide and differentiated work that we're providing for Rosie and the other deaf children are actually very beneficial for several other students within the class. And sometimes our signs can clarify points that perhaps they would have missed.
What do you think?
Rosie is very much accepted within her hearing peer group, and this will have benefits when she leaves school within society. She will obviously, hopefully, move seamlessly into the hearing world outside and into employment.
What advice would the team at Willingdon give to other mainstream teachers?
Make sure that they never start a lesson on a totally new topic without some sort of visual indication of what that lesson is all about.
Yes, and I would say go on a deaf awareness course before you actually start teaching. Then you have a wider knowledge of what is needed.
One of the more important aspects is actually having the confidence to communicate with a hearing impaired child. And it's being aware of how much a child can gain just through body language and tone of voice and your posture. They can certainly know if they've done something well, or conversely, if they're doing something they shouldn't do. They can fully understand that without the adult necessarily being able to sign.
And my advice to any other teachers that are about to have hearing impaired children in their class is not to be afraid of communicating with them, because even if you don't know sign language, there are many other ways that you can communicate.
Fantastic, because you can say things about other people without them knowing, and it's kind of like a secret language you can do and nobody else really understands, so it's exciting. I really like working with Beth because she helped me lots of times when I stuck in work. Beth always helped me and showed me how to work.
It's fantastic having a friend like Rosie.
So, what did you see in the video that you would need to work with a student with a auditory impairment in your classroom? So this was an excellent little video. Both the Anna and the Rosie videos will help you see, visualize working with students with these sensory impairments. So, what did you see? Now let's see what we've learned from this. If you have any questions, feel free to email me or text me, and we will move on. I hope you're having a good, enjoyable course, and I'll talk to you soon.